I saw a shift in you. Obviously, it was 5 years before we had played together in the fall league. I saw a shift
Yep.
in you as like a kind of more like a leader in 2010. Like we had there was some organizational changes where they were like trying to do this whole like militaristic and like, hey, you got to do this and you got to do that. And at this point, you were like the guy who had established yourself as somebody who had success, a routine, and you knew what you needed to do. And they were just annihilating us in AAA. And you stood up for the guys and got called up for Akinori Iwamura. Now, I think
Yep.
Pierce got hurt, but I think Iwamura, you were replacing him. And I remember Neil Huntington saying, because I was in AAA, we're watching out for our guys. We're watching out for Pedro Alvarez. We're watching out for Garrett Jones, all the boys, Kutch, all the dudes that were in AAA. And Neil Huntington said, yeah, he's just kind of here for a fill-in. And you went into, and I think he even had a little bit more choice words, and you went on to 5th place, I think, in the Rookie of the Year that year.
Yeah, I think it was around there. To kind of go back to going into that 2010 season, like you mentioned, in 2009, I got a quick cup of coffee in the big leagues in September, maybe 20 at bats, something like that. But I remember going into that offseason and they said, we want you to play multiple positions. And, Pedro Alvarez is coming behind you at third base. So we don't foresee you playing much there, but we still want you to be able to play there. And so going into the 2010 season in spring training, I was on a mission. I was like, all right, if I'm gonna go down, I'm gonna go down in flames. If I'm gonna get traded, I'm gonna get moved. I'm not gonna make the team. I'm gonna learn all these positions as quickly as possible, from right field to left field, first base, third base, second base. To start that year, I remember being in 2010 to start the year. I remember being in Columbus, Ohio, playing against Columbus, and one of the catchers got hurt on the first day of the season, and it was snowing. It was basically snowing, and they couldn't get a catcher in time to back up the guy that was going to catch that night. And they said, Neil, it was the second day of the season. They said, you can't play this game. We need you to catch bullpens during the game to warm guys up because we have no bullpen catcher and we have no backup catcher. So that's how my 2010 season started. And I mean, that may have been you that got banged up, Eric. I can't fully remember, but I remember just being kind of pissed off. I was just pissed off. And like you said, I knew I knew my strengths at that point. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that I had to play multiple positions, and hopefully I got caught a break like I ended up catching with Aki Iwamura going out or not playing well and getting an opportunity and going up. And so I wouldn't have had it any other way. Sure, would I've liked to have been in the big leagues to start my career. I thought I was going to be a big league catcher for my entire career. That didn't happen. And so I found in the game of baseball, you have to just continue to adapt. You have to continue to look at the positive side of things. I could have easily said, well, you don't want me as a catcher, screw you. Send me somewhere else. And I saw it as a challenge. I saw it as something that was something that could help my career. It was still before the time of playing multiple positions was the big thing. You saw very little platooning on the offensive side of things in those, call it 2010 to 2015 years before the quote unquote Ben Zobrist type of player started to come around. So, I mean, but I do remember those days in AAA, Eric, where we were, guys would come into town and they'd have us out there at 12:45 taking early ground balls, doing catching drills for you guys, outfielders doing work, then going into hitting. And I remember thinking to myself, we're in AAA. I'm exhausted by the time the game is starting. Like, this whole military mindset type thing, it might work on the 19, 20, 21-year-olds down in A-ball and AA, but maybe leave us alone a little bit up here at the AAA level.
Yeah, and I remember you stepping up and saying something about it, and they kind of took offense, like, oh, you're soft. And you were like, what? And you slapped him in the face with the Rookie of the Year that year. And yes, it was me. I hit a double in the first game of the year. It was snowing in Columbus, and I tweaked my hamstring. I ended up just missing the next day, but Luke Carlin was the other catcher that was there that year.
Yes,
so
that's right.
So we were, that was a good memory. But I remember you kind of setting a tone. Everyone's going to remember Andrew McCutchen, but like, you were that guy that was, and you're a hero in Pittsburgh, no doubt. But I felt like that season you set a tone for the rest of the prospects that were coming up, that like you stepped up and you were standing up for the guys for, to me, what I thought was right. Do you feel like you kept a chip on your shoulder towards necessarily like ownership, towards Neil Huntington, toward not like in a vindictive way, but like,
Yeah.
dude, I know what I'm doing. I've been around this game for a while. I'm going to stand up for what I believe in, whether it's contracts, my teammates, whatever it is. Do you feel like you had a chip on your shoulder in that sense?
Yeah, to a degree, and I think it was more along the lines that somewhat of the circumstances. I'd bounce from catcher to third base to several different positions, and for me, that year that we played together in 2010 to start the season was kind of like a breaking point for me to the point where I had always performed offensively. I wasn't necessarily a bad defensive player at the places that I was being put, but I really wasn't being foreseen as an everyday at one position guy until I got that opportunity at second base, which was the last place that I thought that I was going to end up. So I think that I didn't necessarily, I did have a chip on my shoulder, but it wasn't necessarily directed toward anybody in general. It was directed more as a challenge to myself. And I also, being from Pittsburgh and understanding really all the way back to the early 90s, the history of the game as well, of the Pittsburgh Pirates too. And I knew that we had some good pieces, and I knew that I had an opportunity to be a part of a team that was kind of going to take things to the next level. So that was kind of my motivation, but also kind of my rallying cry to guys around, like, hey, AAA is not just a stepping stone. It's not just big league guys coming down and waiting to get called back up, and it's not prospects that are there. Like, you can still use this as a jumping point to not only get better, but to challenge yourself from a physical standpoint, mental standpoint, but also have you ready. I mean, in today's game, I see a lot of guys come up and they have a little bit of a deer in the headlights look because, whether it's not being fully prepared for the adjustments that you have to make at the big league level, or just simply being caught up by the bright lights and never having not had success getting up to the big league. So, I felt very prepared when I got called up to the big leagues, and I feel very fortunate with that. But certainly looking back, you're like, why am I still here? I'm in AAA. I'm leading the league in so many offensive categories. Like, this doesn't make sense. But I had a good time. I learned a lot from people like yourself, especially. But we had a really good group then too. And of course, going into 12 and 13 in Pittsburgh, things finally took off, and I was just so fortunate to be a part of that.
You're not just a hero in Pittsburgh, you're a hero with many big leaguers then for stepping up also about the military style that was going on at times. So has that chilled out? And if so, do you know what kind of caused that? Because we've even had someone like, say, more current Tyler Glass now on this show. And he said, hey, difference between Pittsburgh and the Rays for me during my time period, and it was a previous regime now, he's like, was huge because he mentioned the same thing. He's like, the military thing, not my style. I'm not like that. California surfer dude. It's like, I need people to let me do my thing. And it went much better after he left.
Yeah. And being there, you kind of understood the undertones of what was trying to be accomplished. But at the same time, as you mentioned, there were guys that just, you can't push everybody's buttons the exact same way. You have to push guys and motivate guys in different ways. So for some, that mindset worked. It didn't work for me. I wanted to be, I didn't want to be necessarily coddled. I didn't mind getting yelled at. I didn't mind getting pushed, but I also thought there was a time and place for that. So you don't see as much of it. I certainly, being involved in the Pirates organization, that's no longer prevalent whatsoever. And like I said, I do think from a mental skills perspective, you see some organizations that are a little bit more challenge motivated and trying to get the most out of players from different perspectives and really pushing them. But I think that has kind of gone to the wayside a little bit, at least from what I'm hearing across the board. And for me, what do you need to blow the horn at 4:30 in the morning in October during fall instructional league to get guys out to run sprints? I'm sorry, but that's this is baseball. Let's spend some time learning how to create an approach as a hitter and to create, good chemistry amongst the organization, and to try to find get the most out of yourself. It just doesn't work. I mean, guys were going to the beach and putting telephone poles over their head and doing Navy SEALs catwalk type stuff. I fortunately was a little bit older when some of this stuff was happening, but it's pretty amazing to think that those things were going on.